our second segment, we're going to start talking about Bob Iger. Bob Iger was recently interviewed, and he was defending the Walt Disney Company's streaming strategy. You know, their new focus, their new priority on Disney Plus, on streaming. This is a very, very interesting subject. Disney Family Man 23. What are your thoughts on, Bob Iger defending the streaming strategy? Do you agree with the approach? Do you disagree with the approach? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I do think it's more so that it's catching everyone by surprise, because it's one of those things, because people are it's part of human nature that they're so used to saying, oh, this big blockbuster film is going to be released in theaters. We get to go and experience it in the cinema. And I think what the notion is it happened so quickly because of the pandemic, because of the shutdown. But in reality, this is the way that it was going to go no matter what. It just pushed it up closer to the notion of that when something is released, you start streaming it. And I think that right now, with everything starting to slowly open, but in reality, it's not to its 100% capacity, nor will it ever really go back to the norm, that it's just one of those things that I think Disney is protecting itself as a company to say, if you want to see these films, whether it's Premier Access or what have you, or even if they give it to you free, subscribe to our streaming service, because the more people that they get, they're bringing in a revenue. And during the time when all the parks and resorts were closed, that was their main source of income. And I think that's where even Chapek had said, this is the approach that we're going with, that the front runner right now is not the parks, it's the streaming service. But I do know that there are a lot of cast members that work in the animation department, primarily Pixar, that aren't really happy with this, because they want to see their films in theaters the way it was supposed to be. And I believe it was the team of Luca, the new Disney Pixar film that will be released July 18th, that they are kind of bitter about the notion, because not only is it not going into theaters, but they're not even getting a Premier Access. It's going to be free for everyone who has the subscription of Disney Plus, and they're not too happy about it. So in my sense, I could understand where Disney is coming, because they're trying to save their own butts as far as, cost saving, cost cutting, and essentially getting this streaming service up off the ground. Because of what's going on, I can't foresee that just relying on the cinema alone is going to make their money back of how much these movies cost.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Hollywood hasn't really had to go through like a major seismic shift for a very, very, very long time. The music industry kind of went through their seismic shift in the early 2000s with Napster and iTunes and the whole, downloading music thing when it came about, right, in the early 2000s. And they had to kind of evolve and change. But Hollywood largely stayed unchanged for a very, very long time until recently. So I think you're starting to see that metamorphosis, that change happen now, and it's different. It's different. People aren't used to it, but I think for the most part, they're making the right call. I do think streaming is the future. I do think that the movie theater experience is going to not go away, but it will play a lesser role in the future. It'll be a smaller piece of the bigger pie going forward. And but my heart does go out to the Pixar people. I mean, it definitely does. I mean, every Pixar movie so far that's come out since Disney Plus has opened has been free, whether it be Soul, Onward, Luca, but yet Raya the Last Dragon was Premier Access. So it is kind of, I can see why they're kind of feeling a little bit like as a slap in the face. What are your feelings, Dre, on Vashkaya, on this topic of the streaming service and everything? How do you feel that the strategy so far has gone?
I think it's gone better than maybe even they anticipated. I mean, look, we've had this discussion, several discussions, is Iger wanted to get into this game 10 years ago. I mean, he really wanted it to be where their films are released to the largest slate of distribution possible. Not just with theaters, but also with with potentially streaming, but Blu-ray and other methods of portable media. So this has kind of been a long time coming here. I mean, this is what they've wanted to do for a very, very long time. And this, the effects of the pandemic kind of presented itself to be sort of like an opportunity so that they could kind of get the streaming platform that they had launched months before. That's just crazy to think about, and to really be one of those big top tier streaming services that they kind of envisioned before all this. And like George said, it kept them afloat, right? And it just, listen, this is the way the industry's going. You want to be one of the bigger players. It's supporting your business now. It makes perfect sense to invest in it to the point and to the extent that they have. And to your point, Orange Grove, I mean, your last one of your last videos talking about this. I mean, yeah, it's an important thing to prioritize at this time because, like you said, I mean, like Roy said, like you brought up there, it fuels all the other departments, including the parts. So it's vitally important. And to your point, on this Pixar thing and how they're kind of not fans of it, I can totally understand. I think they see themselves as producing a premium product, and when you give it out for free, it kind of cheapens it a little bit.
Yeah,
and I can kind of get that sense. And a lot of filmmakers, think of the theater in mind. They don't necessarily think, hey, this is going to be, a 3-4 person family sitting on the couch watching this. There's certain jokes and certain things you do to try to get that create that kind of energy in that theater setting. So I can definitely see where they're coming from. It's kind of interesting.
And even before, to Iger's point of view, the length of determination to get Fox into the Disney canon. I mean, like, he worked his butt off to get Fox, and that acquisition was such a process, I think, longer than any of the other acquisitions, because to my knowledge, when they went for Pixar, it was, okay, they presented it, Disney bought Pixar, Disney bought Marvel, Disney bought Lucasfilm. And it just seemed like we were following this pattern with Fox, but it was like because people were trying to fight for it. And I don't really think people realized that Iger's intention of purchasing Fox was not to have a Macaulay Culkin lookalike greeting guests in the park. It was for the streaming service to have a bigger vision than just more so outside of just Disney animation.
Yeah, and the streaming game is something that there's a window. I believe there's a window where you have to jump into it and really cement your place in that streaming war, right? So to speak. Yep. And I think that it's smart of Disney that they jumped in now, and that they're cementing their place in that whole industry. Because, like, right now, I mean, when you look at the streaming landscape, what are you hearing on social media? You hear about Netflix a whole lot. Netflix is doing very well, very relevant still. You hear about Disney Plus, and you hear about HBO Max, right?
Yeah.
But you don't
absolutely.
But you don't really hear about like Peacock or like even Paramount Plus coming, all that stuff. And I think it's a detriment to those companies. I think that Disney was smart to really be aggressive in that. This is the future. This is the absolute future of Hollywood. And it's like sink or swim right now. You got to get in while you can. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind.
Well, and Iger, he talks about this. I remember when he was interviewed, he was talking about like, hey, look, I have never been in an industry without change, right? When he started his days at ABC as a weatherman, and then into the kind of echelons of the executive, team, with ABC and beyond. His thing was like, these guys had gotten a lot very complacent, and as he was starting to get up in the ranks, cable television was coming to the fore, and they had to change their content. They had to change their strategy. So Bob Iger is very versed to like, hey, our industry is constantly changing. It's constantly evolving. You can't sit down. You can't sit on your laurels. You have to change with it, or like you said, it is going to be leave you behind. And it's better to be proactive than reactive.
Right. Exactly. Now, George, I have a question for you in terms of like the streaming services in the relation to the movie theaters. And Dre, I'll get to you on this topic too, because I really want to hear your opinion on this as well. But like, George, what are your feelings on the obligation, so to speak, of the studios in relation to like theater chains like AMC? Do the studios have an obligation to keep these studio chains afloat, or is it fair game? It's not friend business, it's show business, and basically, you do what you got to do to survive. And if Disney makes more money on the streaming service because they get 100%, is that fair game? What are your thoughts on that? What are your feelings on that whole scenario?
I think because Disney is fairly new in the sense compared to other streaming services, like Netflix has been around for, how long, and, Disney is still getting its feet wet, where, now these people have to adapt to say, hey, I have to have a mindset that if I'm making a film, it could potentially go just straight on to streaming. And not even with a Premier Access, it could just be free. So it's more so that it's almost like where these, and I might sound a little bit insensitive to this, but it's kind of like where you have to kind of put your pride aside and say, you know what, if this is the passion that you want, regardless if it's in theaters, your film is still getting out to the public. People are still seeing it. It is still being known. And there were a lot of shows and films that did not make the theater, and they're just as important and strong-willed as if it was in the cinema. So I think it's more so it's to the mindset of the animators and the directors and the producers that are on these projects, that now they have to make a mindset of saying that, if you want to get this out, you're lucky and blessed enough to say, hey, I still have my job and I'm still doing what I love to do. And it's like, this is the bigger picture now. Streaming is the top dog of it. And it's like, why not just get it out and say, hey, I was part of this process. I made this film. So I think it's to the notion of theaters are now being what now drive-ins used to be. Like, it was drive-ins was the top thing. And then theaters came and it was, okay, well, no one goes into their convertible anymore, sit outside and watches a movie. Now streaming is the new top dog, and now theaters are what drive-ins were suffering for. And I think it's just, and I think now in the economy today that people are thinking, well, do I spend all this money to go into a theater, pay $10 for a soda, but be in the comfort in my own home and really focus on the film? And I think that's the way that the mentality has to be, where, because a lot of times you can get a lot of disruptions in theaters. It can, you want to have that experience to say, but I think it's more so with the animators. I think it's more so that if they have to have it on the streaming service, I think their problem is, why is the Disney animation only getting the Premier Access and not ours? I think it's more so of the questioning of why is it. But I think to speaking on their side, I think it's just they want to have the same type of pedestal that Disney animation has right now. And I think if they were to get a little bit of that Premier Access, I think they would feel a little better about it. But I guess only time will tell.
Yeah. Well, Dre, what are your feelings on like the obligation or no or lack thereof? To be fair, where do you stand on the studio's relationship with the theater chains? Do the studios have an obligation to make sure that the theater chains stay around, or is it survival of the fittest? If Bob Iger and Chapek can make money on the streaming service, and see you later, movie theaters. What are your thoughts on that? Like, in terms of
no, they don't have an obligation. That's the kind of crappy part of this all. I mean, there are windowing practices, right? There are kind of established windowing practices, and theaters are firm. You know, it's like, hey, look, we're at least going to have 4 weeks. A lot of times it was 6 or 8, and that's just kind of going to be how it is because we need content to be kind of pouring in to keep our kind of, you know, situation afloat. And the studios were, you know, obviously they wanted to bypass that system, right? If you could effectively bypass it, then instead of having the split profits 50-50 or 60-40 or whatever the arrangement is, you can keep all that money for yourself, and you can cut down distribution costs and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it really does. What is it? It really does make financial and business sense in that way. But again, it's that right now the theaters kind of lost all of their negotiating power. You know, they kind of they aren't the top dogs that they used to be, and it's made it very, very clear. I mean, you saw the whole Universal AMC thing that happened for a while after Trolls 3 was launched, and how much money that made. And Universal's CEO just came out and said, "Hey, look, we're just going to go ahead and release all of our films exclusively on streaming and theaters." Or I can't forget his correct terminology, but the theater owners were furious because it's like our complete business, our it's just everything's being bypassed, and it's like, how could you do this? We have we have agreements in place, and it's like, who's going to enforce them? Who's going to hold you to it? Who's going to, I mean, if nobody's going to the theaters, why should I go through you? And it's just, it is a really complex issue. And for every single day that the studios don't get don't get films in theaters, that's one less screen
well, and you also have to consider for how long that theaters have been shut down.
Yeah. Yep.
Really think about the amount of money that even Disney had lost in all areas. Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, that at the end of the day, they're a business. They have to stay afloat. They have to make money. And sometimes you have to step on some toes in order to do that. It sucks, but it's like at the end of the day, you have to cover your own butt. And as Dre was saying, that why not take the whole pie and not a piece of it? It's especially nowadays. I think a lot of companies, and not just Disney, are looking at the bigger picture as how to save money, but spend money to make it.
Right.
That's what it boils down to.
Well, and I think the movie going theater experience has changed forever. Like, there's really no reason for a romantic comedy or a movie like The Secret Garden to be in theaters. I mean, it's not a big screen sound system kind of experience. Yeah. It makes much more sense for, studios like Disney, Warner Brothers, what have you, to release a small movie like Secret Garden or some romantic comedy onto a streaming service than it would be to release that into the theater. So I think going forward, I think the theaters will exist, but it's probably going to be limited to a lot of the big tentpoles. It'll probably be a lot of Star Wars, a lot of Marvel, Avatar, like Godzilla, versus Kong kind of films, DC. That's the future of the theater experience. But these little films that are just like comedies or romantic films or whatever, you don't need to see that in the theater. And it probably will go straight to whatever streaming service is connected to whatever studio is making that movie.
My hopes for the Hot Chick 2 just went right down the drain.
Yes, it did.
Well, this is kind of how it is. But no, I mean, look, you have, and that speaks to the content production side as well. I mean, do you produce those films? I mean, there are films that you produced previously because you just had a gluttony of screens to fill and an audience that could be willing to see those or not. And do you necessarily release those now, or do you even produce those now, based on just the changes in distribution? I mean, it's really profound.
It's hard, and I'm convinced too, and I could be wrong. This is totally my guess, my conjecture, or whatever. But if Disney Plus existed 5 years ago, I think a movie like Solo, a Star Wars story, would have been a series. I don't think they would have put that in theaters. I think the game has changed that drastically since that movie was released. I just, yeah, that would have been a series. That would have been like Kenobi, I think.
But kind of going back to the cast members and the animation, I can understand the questioning of it though, because what really depicts a film to say, oh, this film will make premiere access, but this one doesn't?
Right.
Like what defines that line to say, well, because it kind of makes it look like, oh, this picture is going to be better than this one.
Right.
It's more of an anticipation of saying how many people would pay money to see Raya and the Last Dragon as opposed to Luca. So pretty much the company saying, oh, people will pay to see Raya, but no one will pay Luca, so let's just throw it on there for free.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what you're seeing is some sort of room full of executives basically making the call. Okay, what we think we can make on this movie versus what we think we can make on it in theaters. They're absolutely doing that. They're absolutely thinking it's not necessarily, maybe not necessarily what movie is better, but what movie is more marketable, what movie can bring us more money, stuff like that. So this one's better for premiere. This one's better for that. It's sad because Pixar does a great product. And
I have to say, watching the trailer, because they just released it, I think it was either a couple of days ago or yesterday for Luca. Yeah. And I have to say, I am very interested to really see this movie because it just looks like a fun, feel-good type of movie. And plus, with it being set in Italy, I'm Italian. So, I mean, what's more better than that? So
there we go. There we go. Like I said in the Annette Funicello video we made, man, here, let's have a cannoli.
Yeah.
I'm only half Italian.
I love Italian food. Let's go. No.
Let's go. Look,
and that's the thing too, right? I mean, you're setting a value statement on product coming out. And, to your point, it's about executives. It's not even about releasing of the film and the film doing well or not good or whatever. It's also about like, hey, how do we balance this Disney Plus platform that we have? What films do we want to premiere for free that will bump our subscriber count up? So there's a lot of like jostling for position and just a lot of bureaucracy. It's the only word I can think of it. Jumbling around these films with these creatives, it's got to be crazy.